Why is it that the kinder you are, the less you're respected? That question might have followed you in silence for years. Because it's not just a theory, it's a wound. You try to be the good one, the peacemaker, the one who shows up early, stays late, forgives fast, and asks for nothing in return. And slowly, you begin to realize that the world doesn't reward kindness the way you hoped. People expect it, take it, then forget it. And when you finally burn out, when you finally say enough, they look at you like you're the problem. Because somewhere along the way, your kindness became your cage. You see there's a hidden law beneath social interaction, one that's rarely spoken, but always enforced. It's this: we don't chase what we already own. We don't respect what we assume will never leave. That's why the most emotionally available people so often end up overlooked. That's why the softest ones attract the hardest lessons. Because warmth without boundaries doesn't look like strength. It looks like submission. And the human brain, wired for survival, instinctively ranks what is scarce as valuable, and what is always available as ordinary. It hurts. But it's true. In psychology, there's a concept known as the warmth-competence trade-off. It means the more you're seen as warm, kind, and helpful, the more likely people will subconsciously assume you're less capable, less assertive, less powerful. But when someone holds back, appears emotionally distant, composed, even cold, we instinctively read it as confidence, control, even danger. And what we fear a little, we respect a lot. It's not fair, but it's reality. And if you don't understand it, you'll keep bleeding energy into people who were never built to hold it. Let me ask you, have you ever been the always there person, the one who replies instantly, who says yes before thinking, who explains, justifies, and over-apologizes for simply having a boundary? You were taught this was what made you good. But goodness without self-respect isn't virtue. It's self-erasure. Because when you're always available, you become invisible. People stop thanking you, stop noticing you. They assume you'll carry the weight because you always have. Until one day you're too tired to lift anything at all. And nobody notices. Because you taught them that your exhaustion was normal. Here's the hard truth: you teach people how to treat you. With every boundary you ignore, every explanation you give when none is required, every moment you stay silent when someone crosses a line, you're training the world to devalue you. And the more you do it, the more it becomes your role. You become the easy one, the one who absorbs chaos, the one who always forgives. And no one respects a role they didn't have to earn. So what happens when you shift, when you stop explaining, when you start saying no without guilt, when you stop showing up for people who wouldn't even ask how you're doing? At first they'll be confused, maybe even angry, because your silence feels unfamiliar, uncomfortable. But over time, they begin to adapt. They speak more carefully. They listen more attentively. They realize your warmth is no longer free. It's earned. Let me be clear. Becoming cold doesn't mean becoming cruel. It means becoming clear. It's the kind of cold that says, I know what I offer, and I don't offer it to everyone. It's the calm, collected distance of someone who no longer needs to prove anything, who can walk away without theatrics because they're no longer attached to being liked. It's the quiet strength of someone who doesn't need to react. Because peace isn't just their goal, it's their default. And that kind of coldness, it's magnetic. Throughout history, the ones we admire most, they weren't the loudest, they weren't the most available. They were the ones who chose solitude when others needed noise, who set boundaries even when it cost them relationships, who valued their time and presence like rare currency. They didn't chase validation, they became it. And people respected them, not because they were warm, but because they were whole. Maybe you've felt it recently. The desire to stop explaining, to pull your energy inward, to rest in your own space without guilt. That isn't coldness. That's clarity. That's your spirit realigning. You're not becoming distant. You're becoming disciplined. You're no longer trying to be everything to everyone. You're finally being something real to yourself. So I'll ask you again. Why is it that the kinder you are, the less you're respected? Because without boundaries, your warmth becomes background noise. Because kindness, when handed out freely to those who haven't earned it, becomes invisible. And the only way to change that is to pull back, to choose silence over explanation, distance over desperation, self-respect over people-pleasing. Because when you become cold, you become clear, and from clarity, respect is born. Most people confuse coldness with cruelty. They hear the word cold and imagine someone bitter, detached, uncaring. But that's not what this is about. True coldness, the kind we're talking about here, has nothing to do with hatred or hostility. It has everything to do with emotional discipline. It's the kind of cold that doesn't yell, that doesn't argue, that doesn't chase, beg, or plead. It simply observes, withdraws, and lets silence say everything. Because once you realize your peace is more important than their approval, everything changes. You begin to see how much of your energy was wasted trying to fix people who didn't want to be fixed, trying to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, trying to be enough for people who were never enough for themselves. And in that realization, a quiet shift happens inside you. You stop answering every message right away. You stop explaining your no. You stop defending your boundaries like they're up for debate. And at first, people will feel the shift, and they won't like it. Because people who are used to your warmth will feel your coldness as a threat. But that's not your problem. That's just their reaction to no longer having control. Let me give you something practical. There's a rule in human behavior called the availability principle. The more available something is, the less value people assign to it. It's why people chase what's just out of reach. It's why silence is more powerful than shouting. And it's why someone who is selective with their time is respected far more than someone who gives it to everyone. Emotional coldness works the same way. It's not about being unreachable. It's about being rare, intentional, focused. It's the quiet power of someone who says, "Not everyone gets access to me. And if you want it, you have to earn it." Think of people you admire, the ones who seem unshakable. Do they beg to be understood? Do they chase after apologies that were never given? Do they over-explain themselves to strangers on the internet? No. They move with calm detachment, not because they don't feel, but because they've mastered what to give their energy to. They've stopped reacting to every insult, every misunderstanding, every emotional tug-of-war. Because they've realized something vital. Not everything deserves a response. Not everyone deserves your truth. And once you embrace that, You start to realize how much of your pain came from giving too much of yourself away. You were too accessible, too giving, too ready to explain what should have been obvious. You thought vulnerability would build connection, but sometimes it only gives people more tools to cut you open. So you learn to hold things closer, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You begin to understand that mystery protects energy, that not everyone should know how you feel, that the strongest people often say the least, not because they're hiding, but because they're free. Here's the paradox. The colder you become, the more people notice you. Because coldness signals self-possession. It shows that you are no longer emotionally hungry, that you don't need validation like oxygen, and people can feel that. They feel it when you don't rush to explain yourself, when you walk away from conversations that go nowhere, when you stop over-apologizing for simply having standards. It unsettles them. Not because you're wrong, but because you've stepped outside the emotional script they're used to. And now they're forced to adjust. This is especially true in relationships, romantic, social, even professional. If you always give more than you receive, if you're always the one reaching out, initiating, holding the space, you create imbalance. You become the emotional worker in a connection that's meant to be mutual. But the moment you stop, the moment you become colder, quieter, more inward, the entire dynamic changes. People start wondering where you went, what they did wrong. They begin to realize they've been swimming in warmth they never earned. And now that it's gone, they feel the cold air, and they remember what they lost. That's the power of emotional absence. It clarifies everything. But becoming cold isn't just about how others respond. It's also about how you grow. When you become emotionally selective, you start spending more time with yourself. You start listening to your own inner voice instead of seeking echoes from the outside. You begin to protect your peace like a sacred space, filtering out noise, drama, obligation, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've finally started caring about yourself. And in that space, growth becomes exponential. Your creativity returns. Your focus sharpens. Your intuition strengthens. Because emotional coldness clears the clutter. It forces you to confront what matters and let go of what doesn't. People will say you've changed. They'll say you've become distant, that you're not the same. And they're right. You're not the same person who over-explains, who waits for permission to rest, who gives your soul away to those who only wanted your time. You're no longer desperate to be understood, because you've started to understand yourself. And once you have that, once you are anchored in your own worth, you don't beg for respect. You command it, silently, powerfully, and without apology. So if you feel yourself becoming colder, don't panic. Don't fight it. Honor it. That coldness you're stepping into isn't emptiness. It's evolution. It's your spirit maturing. It's your mind detaching from chaos. It's your heart healing from overexposure. Because sometimes, to be truly respected, you must become just cold enough to stop warming everyone but yourself. Respect doesn't begin in the eyes of others. It begins inside you. And that's the part we're never taught. We're told to work hard, to be kind, to please, to serve. And if we do it well enough, long enough, eventually the world will recognize our worth. But it rarely does, because the world doesn't respond to effort. It responds to energy, to presence, to how you carry yourself, not what you've endured. And if you carry yourself like someone who's desperate to be liked, you'll be tolerated, used, dismissed. But if you carry yourself like someone who knows their value, someone who doesn't need attention, doesn't beg, doesn't flinch, then suddenly, the room shifts. People listen more, interrupt less. They feel something they can't name, but they know its power. And that power is rooted in one thing: self-respect. When you become cold, it's not because you stopped loving people. It's because you finally started loving yourself. You stopped chasing closure. You stopped needing everyone to agree. You stopped sacrificing your peace for someone else's comfort. And in that stillness, in that quiet detachment, you begin to reclaim what you gave away so freely: your dignity, your voice, your direction. Because respect isn't something you get by being soft. It's something you command by being clear. Let me say something you might need to hear. You don't owe anyone your softness. Not the friend who always drains you. Not the partner who manipulates with guilt. Not the family member who never listens unless you're breaking. You don't have to bleed to be understood. You don't have to smile through disrespect. You don't have to keep giving chances to people who only take. Your compassion has limits. And honoring those limits doesn't make you cold. It makes you whole. Because real kindness comes from a full cup. And if you're always pouring yourself into others, eventually you go empty. Coldness is the barrier that protects the well. It says, I can give, but only from overflow, not from depletion. Think of it like this. You've been standing in a room with everyone's voices louder than your own. You've been nodding along, shrinking yourself to fit. You've been explaining, justifying, apologizing for existing. And now you've gone quiet. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you're done explaining. You've realized that clarity doesn't need noise, that peace doesn't beg, that presence doesn't chase. You've chosen cold silence over warm desperation. And finally, the echo chamber breaks. People start looking for you. Not because you yelled louder, but because you stopped responding. They wonder what changed, what you're thinking, what they missed. And in that void, something magical happens. Your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. Because now, you've become rare. Now, you've become unpredictable. Now, you've stopped giving yourself away so easily. And rarity commands attention. Not the loud kind, but the deep, unnerving kind, the kind that lingers in silence and forces reflection. Here's the final truth. You don't become cold to hurt others. You become cold to stop hurting yourself. You become cold when you realize your story was never safe in their hands. You become cold when your empathy was weaponized against you. You become cold when you finally see that the ones you bent over backward for wouldn't even lean forward if you were falling. That kind of coldness isn't cruelty, it's self-preservation. It's walking away from dysfunction. It's refusing to entertain what drains you. It's being willing to be misunderstood rather than sacrificing your soul for the illusion of harmony. And when you live that way, when your coldness is rooted in truth, people notice. They don't always admit it, but they feel it. They treat you differently. They approach with caution. They listen more closely. Not because you demanded respect, but because you finally stopped giving away the parts of you they never earned. You became scarce. You became measured. You became your own mirror. And in that mirror they saw something unfamiliar. Someone who no longer needs to be loved to feel whole. Someone who no longer fears rejection because they've already accepted themselves. So what now? You've become colder, quieter, clearer. But don't stop there. Use that coldness as a container to rebuild your identity, to filter your relationships, to set standards that no longer bend under pressure. Speak when necessary. Walk away when needed. Detach when disrespected. Let your stillness be your boundary. Let your silence be your protection. Let your absence be your statement. And when they ask what happened to you, you won't need to explain, because by then, they'll already know. In a world that feeds on emotional chaos, clarity feels cold. But coldness is how you survive the fire. And if that coldness means fewer friends, fewer invitations, fewer people who misunderstand you, so be it. Because the ones who stay will no longer take you for granted. And you'll stop betraying yourself to be understood. You'll stop shrinking to stay included. You'll stop bleeding for those who never learned to heal themselves. Respect is not found in your warmth. It's found in your walls. In the strength it takes to say, I deserve more than this. I don't have to explain why. I am not afraid to be alone because I am finally at home in myself. That's the coldness you need. Not to freeze the world out, but to stop letting it burn you.